Welcome to From a Woman to a Leader, a podcast dedicated to discussing the challenges and providing tips for women in tech leadership. Hi, I'm your host, Limor Bergman-Gross, and in each episode, we'll hear from other successful women in tech, sharing their stories, insights, and advice. Join us as we empower each other to reach our full potential in the tech industry. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader. And today we are going to talk about from health challenges to AI leadership. And I'm super excited to host today this talk with Madhumita Jena. And we know each other, Madhumita and I, from working together at DigitalOcean. So we have kind of a history together, and I'm super excited to have Madhumita here and talk about the incredible change she has made. But just a little bit about Madhumita. She is a seasoned tech leader with 18 years of experience at renowned companies like Microsoft, Groupon, Redfin, DigitalOcean, as I mentioned, that we work together, and Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. And she recently decided to focus on a passion of her, and she started Naari. And Naari is all about, it's a platform to improve women's health and productivity using AI. So we're going to talk about that today, and I'm super excited to invite you to listen. So hi, Madhumita, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast, Limor. I am looking forward to this discussion.
Me too. Thank you so much for being here today. And let's first start maybe talking a little bit about your background and your journey in the tech industry and what kind of led you to your current role as a founder of Naari.
I want to go back to my roots. So I grew up in a very small place called Kalpakkam in India. It was a nuclear power township. So growing up, I had really good role models in STEM. Like I saw scientists, both men and women, work together to build things for the nation. I was also very good in math and science. And so when it came to college admissions, I picked computer science based on the recommendation of my father. Like if you talk to folks of my generation, in India, you will see that most people took either engineering or medicine without actually knowing too much about it. So I did make a choice to take a stream that would make me financially independent, and I was also good at it. And after college, I started working in Microsoft, and I worked in some of the core enterprise teams like Visual Studio and SQL Server. I worked in Microsoft for 7 years, but after a few years of working in Microsoft, I wasn't very sure why was I working in tech. And I actually contemplated leaving tech and going to France and becoming a baker. But I decided, you know what, before I do that, let me try to do something else to like figure out if I'm really, not interested in tech. So I moved to Bay Area during that time, and I took up a role in Groupon, which I could actually see the impact of my work on customers, and I could see my work directly impacting customers. And I would say that was the second innings for me in tech. I loved applying technology to solve real world problems. And now I've done it in multiple domains. I've done it in real estate, I've done it in cloud computing, DO, where we work together, and then education, and now my current initiative for women's wellness. And if you look at the theme of which I've been working on, I have been building infrastructures and productivity tools for developers all throughout my career. And my new initiative is building upon the same thing. I feel that, we as women battle a lot of challenges and have to balance a lot of things in our lives. And I wish we had better tooling to improve our productivity. So we do talk about how do we improve efficiency of organizations. I want to start talking about how can we improve our efficiency, women's efficiency, using tools and get them, back in workplace. And that's kind of what Anari is focusing on.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing. I mean, one of the things that I noticed when you talked about your career journey was about making sure that you have an impact, that your work is actually impactful. And this is such a great tip, right? Because a lot of women don't really know why they're doing what they're doing. And that's a great kind of tip for women who are maybe unsure if they want to stay in tech. Maybe don't give up so quickly, and maybe you should be in tech, just maybe not the same
Exactly.
company you're at.
Yes. And I think a lot of times, with all the things that are going on in our lives, it's very hard to take that reset, like just to prepare for interviews and like try to make a move to a new place takes a lot of effort. And sometimes we just don't have the capacity to do it. And we think we don't like tech. And, and I think it's important to take stock of what's going on with your life, both at work and at home, to like figure out if you can make the move or if you need to make the move. Yeah.
Absolutely. And when we had a previous conversation, you mentioned that you were facing some challenges with your health and the health complication, and wanted to be healthy. And at a certain point in your life, and I wanted to ask you how those challenges impacted both your personal life and your career, and what motivated you to take action.
Definitely. So I had my second child during COVID, and during the childbirth, I developed sepsis and I experienced medical complications postpartum. I also suffer from asthma, and along with all the complications that came with my childbirth, I was finding it extremely hard to balance being a new mom, taking care of my own health as well as like working from home. It was just becoming impossible with all the things that was going on around us, and I decided to take time off. I'll say I was very fortunate to be in this position where I could take the time off. A lot of people did not have that option, so I feel fortunate about it. But it also indicates that if we have an option, we need to like, slow down to take care of ourselves. There is nothing wrong about it, to taking time to like take care of ourselves, because unless we are fine, I don't think we can get give our best to our families or our work. So, I think one of the things that I did during this time was like, with my health, like I would be in the state where I wouldn't even be able to walk a mile, or with both kids being at home by like noon or two, I would be completely out of energy. And it was just not sustainable, right? And when I talked to my healthcare professionals and I did all my tests would come back fine. And I was clueless about like what was going on. Why do I not have the energy? So during that time, I actually worked with a group which works on an anti-inflammatory plant-based diet with Indian recipes, and I was able to get off my medication in like 5 weeks. And I was also struggling with this aspect of not being a working woman anymore after I left my job, because that's kind of what that's what I was. I have been working for like, I was working for almost like 15 years at that point of time, and suddenly not working changes all the aspects of your life. Like, you don't have friends to meet during the weekdays, all your friends are working. And you don't have you are not in the same network of stay at home moms where to get the support that you need. And with COVID it was even harder because people were scared to like, meet and like do
Mhm.
things together, right? And so as I discussed all these challenges with my, you know therapist, and it was like, starting to get clear that, there are some challenges and expectations that I was having for myself, which came from a cultural context, like on how I dealt with things at home, things with my parents, things with my children, which was not the same as that of like, what Caucasian women here in the US experience. Like, one stat around this is that, in India, a lot of women spend almost 7 to 8 hours in chores compared to around 4 hours in the US. And that that is like, your childcare, your elder care, your home management, and all of that, right? And so I realized that there is probably a cultural aspect to like what I have internalized my role should be in, and that's stopping me from being productive. And that's kind of what inspired me to like build Nari, because I felt like not just my physical aspects, like, there aren't as many studies as I want for Indian women with respect to like the physical health, the mental health aspect, the productivity aspect. There's not enough research that has been done for women of color like me to make me productive and to make me successful in achieving what I want in my life. And I'm not saying every person has to come back to work or every person has to be a working person, but I feel like every person should be happy and should be able to do what they want to do in their life, right? For me, it has been clear. I want to work, and I have told this to my husband and people around me. I'm going to work till I can work 70, 80, whatever it is. I want to always work. And that's kind of what I visualize myself as. And then when something stops me from doing it, I feel very uncomfortable about it and I don't feel I'm myself. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I want to just kind of highlight one thing that you mentioned that I think is very important. You mentioned that you decided to put yourself first, take a leave from work, and take care of yourself. And I noticed that both on myself and other women, we tend to put ourselves last most of the time. We tend to always take care of our families, and we work, we do everything, and then when it comes to our own health, both mentally, physically, emotionally, we put ourselves last, and
Yes.
we shouldn't.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree. I think we are backbones of our family along with our partners. If our partners are supportive, I'm being fortunate to have a very supportive partner. And I believe like both of us need to be like, fit and happy in order to like, build a family that we want and, be successful in our careers. And I don't think it's wrong to put yourself up. I actually take one Friday off every 4 to 6 weeks where I just spend time with myself. I don't take any calls. I don't talk to anyone. I don't check social media. I feel like taking that time off for myself and just like hiking the way I want to hike, not like pulling two kids around and making sure they have food or anything, right? Like taking that time for myself really helps me to get back to like being a better parent and being a better person at my work. So I do think it's important we take care of ourselves to like support everybody else in the family. That tank that you have of giving needs to be filled up periodically. And I'll be honest, I burn out as well. There are periods of time when I can't take time out for myself, but I do feel I realize that I'm burning out. I need to take time for myself and do something for myself. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I want to use that to send a message to all the women out there, and especially, women, also with family, with children, and with spouses. It will make you a better spouse and a better mother if you take care of yourself rather than if you put yourself last, because you will be, as you said, sometimes the health issues come, and then you will be less energized and will not have the energy to take care of your family. Maybe you'll be not as patient as you would and not as happy. And when you are happy, when you're fulfilled, when you're doing things that makes you, that are good for you, whether it's nurturing your career, your health, your well-being, you are also a better mom, a better caretaker for your parents or for others, and a better spouse. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I love how you put that there.
Yeah. But I want to make sure that we talk about the thing that we wanted to talk about here. So you mentioned you had health issues. And you also told me when we spoke earlier that you felt like the system in the US was not really understandable, or there wasn't really knowledge about what are the unique situations that Indian women face that inspired you to kind of create Nari. So I would love to hear about Nari and about the unique, health issues that it helps to address.
Yeah. Definitely, right? Like, I think our mission, like my mission in Nari, is to empower women achieve their full health and potential using AI. So based on my own health challenges and the challenges I faced in COVID with respect to not being able to do what I wanted to do in my life, I realized that, I need to build something which can support women. I started working on Nari almost a year back on and off. I want to talk a little bit about my journey, about, how after taking a break for a couple of years, I came back. So after I put my kid in preschool, both kids gone to school after COVID, it took me a few months to like actually detangle myself to come back to work. It wasn't a switch. You know what we think, like, one of the things that I feel is like, if I had taken a 9 to 5 job, it could have been a pretty quick transition back to like, back to like having all the infrastructure in place. But then when you're doing something on your own, you it takes a little bit longer. Limor, you are also doing your own work. You kind of understand, right? Like
Yeah.
when you're starting your own thing, you're thinking about it for like 4 hours. You start with the part time and then like try to detangle it. So it took me few months to detangle what I used to do at home, because I had become the primary parent with like only one of us working. And so I kind of had to figure out things with my husband. With like, I think we spent a lot of time communicating on what needs to be done. And I would really want to highlight one thing, and it's like, I think in partnership with your husband or spouse, I think it's really important to talk out on, what are your non-negotiables, what do you want to do, and what are things you can outsource if possible, and figure out a plan on like how both of you can have a fulfilling career. It also took conversations with my kids, especially my older one, because he'd gotten used to coming back home and being like chauffeured around for all his activities, to like tell him that, what, I need to start working. And it means that there are going to be changes to how you are going to be spending your time after school and things like that. So it took me a few months to like get started around this. And I did a lot of like survey around. Once I got started, I started talking to folks. I started talking to women like me here, back in India, in Australia, in the UK. I just started to talk to like a lot of like South Asian women to like, figure out what their challenges were. And like, that's kind of how I got started. And you know in March, right, we all started talking about like generative AI. And then I was like, is it possible for me to do something with generative AI for women? And that's kind of how I stumbled upon this AI assistant that I have built for women, which can be accessed by WhatsApp or Messenger, along with the survey as well as the AI tool that I've built. I'll talk about the tool a little bit later. I think I've figured out like there are few things that are like, different for women in India compared to here. One is that 3 in 4 women in India today suffer from lifestyle related diseases like heart disease, obesity, and also are suffering from anxiety and depression. The number of doctors that we have back in India is much lower, and especially in mental health, there's a huge stigma associated with it. Until you're a complete lunatic or like are completely destructive, people do not take you to like, mental health professionals. And so, like people have, prenatal postpartum depression, and you just like, people just tell you to like run through life just like that. I think we also have very few doctors there. And so I don't think people have the help that they need to deal with it. And the third thing, which is I think the big technical aspect that I would like to address over time, is data gap. There are like, good examples around it. Like, for example, in breast cancer, uh, so breast cancer is a disease of young women in India, which hits you around 30s and 40s, and it's much more aggressive than in the US, where it hits you around in your 50s and 60s. And the genes that actually end up like the genetic composition that ends up like causing cancer is also different, and is undetected by tests like 23andMe, right? And so there is research that needs to be done, and there are organizations that are just starting there. So I think there is one part of it is like there is data gap, which essentially means that we don't even know about a lot of problems that women are facing or how they should be treated. And second aspect is there hasn't been as much investment in actually solving these problems. And given what I've gone through, I feel like I really want to like sit down and start digging into that problem and try to understand what needs to be solved. As part of the AI assistant, I had conversations with women in my own circle. And then once I opened up the AI assistant to people, I've been getting, I have thousands of users now, and
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten more than 20,000 messages on this platform. I think I've been seeing like three important aspects that women want to really improve on. One is their relationships. I think there are a lot of questions about how do they handle things, not just with their partners or boyfriends, but also their families. How do you handle LGBTQ issues in India, where a lot of things are not legal yet? The second thing has been like, I've been very surprised to see a lot of women want to like get better at education, given only 30% of Indian women actually go to college. A lot of women are interested in getting educated. They're asking questions about it. They're trying to figure things out. And the third thing is financially independent. I actually opened up my AI assistant to Hindi, and that took it to like a lot of tier 2 and tier 3 cities in India. And a lot of women want to become financially independent. They're looking for remote jobs, which, you and I have worked in a remote job before, NDO, and we know it works, right? And a lot of people are looking for that. And then, that's kind of where I feel my focus is going to be on Nari to like improve the access to these people and try to solve some of these problems if I can. So
Absolutely, yeah. And is Nari focused on women in India specifically?
at this point of time, yes, but I am thinking of expanding it to South Asian women. At this point of time, yes.
Okay, cool. And I wanted to also ask you, I mean, the challenges you mentioned, like women in India face, is it still valid when when Indian women move to the US, or it's no longer valid just because of the different health system, or just curious about whether it's location based or culture based.
I think a lot of it is also culture based, right? Like, I think we move here, our eating and habits and all of those don't change overnight, right? So we're still eating the same diet, but in a different place. And so, good example is a lot of Indians get diagnosed with like uh, diabetes when they're pregnant. Like I forget the name for like what it's called, the diabetes that you get during pregnancy, and
Mm-hmm.
that who are like starchy diet, a very pretty high carbohydrate. And so the numbers with which we get diagnosed for diabetes is lower than what the numbers that they use in India.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so there is like, and then you go through all that stress of like measuring and everything all the time, right? And so one thing is like, of course, our diet doesn't change. I think definitely. And then and we are getting measured by a different bar than what the bar that should be made for us. So there's some organizations here in Bay Area, like Sati, which works on the cardiovascular diseases that Indians have, despite not drinking, exercising regularly, cutting out, the food that people ask you to cut out. The way that our bodies are made are very different. Like the arteries are smaller. So you have how our bodies are made, what we eat. That doesn't change overnight, right? So that is definitely an aspect. The cultural aspect, I do think there is like, when you spend like 15, 20 years in India, you have internalized what you are expected. There is like you, like, for example, the role you play in the house is very inspired by what you've seen back in India. And a lot of women I talk to, I think, take up most of the work at home. And I very rarely see equal partnership at home to like get things done. I think it's changing in my generation, where I'm seeing a lot more people partnering with their spouses to do things, but I think there is still like a lot of burden on women to do stuff. And I think this is a conversation I had few weeks ago. A friend of mine also mentioned that now that we are educated, a lot of like education, school related decisions, which typically men took back in India, is also falling on women. And so your entire, like, your managing your house, taking care of your kids, making decisions for them, making both health and school decisions, everything is falling on you. And so the umbrella of things that you're doing is increasing. And I do think that, culturally we do have much higher expectations how we you know take care of our adults compared to the US. I'm not going to say one thing is better than another thing. I think each thing has an advantage of things, but like that adds a lot of burden to, like, women who end up being the caregiver for elders in the house. I will be very honest, I don't think it's wrong. I'm just saying that it's a lot of work. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a lot of burden. And before, I mean, I can't believe the time flies. So I want to make sure that we just touch on Naari and how you utilize AI for Naari.
Okay. So I'm using generative AI to, like, generate responses for people. So this Nari can be accessed via WhatsApp or Messenger. The reason why I choose these platforms is that, a lot of women in India, there are 630 million women in India, and 50% of them use WhatsApp. And so I did not want to, like, actually go build a new app or something which they need to download. I wanted to make it very easy for them to access this AI assistant. And so I use generative AI in the backend, and I use DigitalOcean, where we work there,
Yeah.
to host my servers and get my work done. I'm actually very proud about working in DO because it was so quick for me to, like, put up the infrastructure. And I'm very proud of what we built together, Limor, in DO.
Yes,
It does
absolutely.
make entrepreneurs' lives much easier. The costs are great. The startup costs are great. It's pretty easy to use. So I use DO. I use generative AI frameworks in the backend, and then I have WhatsApp or Messenger, and people can just chat whenever they have questions. And that's kind of what I have built so far. My next steps is actually to start building out a hybrid LLM, so that answers are, much better, and are more, answers are better, and which take the local context into consideration. I'm also looking at what could be my go-to-market strategy. I'm very early in my journey. I'm also looking at my go-to-market strategy, and I'm thinking of, like, using hyper local recommendations for people, and see if there is a potential for ad revenue there. I'm also talking to hospitals and other medical organizations in India to start figuring out, how do I actually start filling the data gap? Like, I need to, like, figure out who to talk to and where to get that information to, like, fill that data gap. And how do we sponsor more studies? How do we actually have more information out there for us to, like, first get the data, and then the tooling will start coming in. The tooling will pick up the information. So those are some of the things that I want to focus on. I'm extremely early on my journey, I would say. And those are the things I'm looking at right now.
That sounds very exciting and much needed. I mean, and thank you so much for doing that and helping so many other women. And before we part ways, I wanted to ask you, how can women find you? How can they find Naari? How can they reach out to you? Yeah. We'll just wait a second. No worries, no worries. Take your time. And I'll just say, while you drink water, that I really much relate to your love for DO. So DigitalOcean have a special place in my heart. I'm always a great advocate for DO. Everyone asks me, hey, and so I always recommend, I refer to them several, companies. So there is definitely a pride in what we did there. And, we love DO, even though we don't work there anymore. Definitely. Yeah. So let's get back to you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just how women can reach out to you and find about Naari.
Yeah, definitely. you can definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. And then Naari is also on LinkedIn. I do have a website called Naari.tech. I have Facebook and Instagram presence as well. And I do have the links with which you can start trying Naari and get the responses you want. So, and I'll also pass on that information to like Limor so that we have it in this podcast in case you want to get in touch with me or like try out Naari.
Absolutely. So I'll get all the links from you. I'll put it in the episode description. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Madhumita. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Same here, Limor, and thank you so much again for having me with you today. I really appreciate your support in this.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader. This is your host, Limor Bergman Gross, and I want to encourage you to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Limor Bergman, and let me know. What do you think about the episodes? Feel free also to comment on Apple Podcasts and tell me, what do you want me to talk about? Which guests do you want me to bring? I really appreciate that, and have a wonderful day.